finishing this evening with a presentation of PeterDiCampo, who set out to save the world, he joined the Peace Corps, became a more traditional photojournalist, but is now doing something really interesting on Instagram, calling Everyday Africa. And we invite him to tell you all about it. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you all very much. Thanks for having me. It's intimidating being the final speaker of the last couple of days. So everyone else that's been here has been really amazing. And I've kind of been left wondering what could I possibly offer. And I think the real thing is that, I mean, I've been at other events like this and I always kind of leave with my head spinning and sort of thinking, you know, it's great that all these things exist, but how can I use them? And I think the speakers you've seen here have done a really good job of talking about how we can start to think about using them. But the one additional thing I can offer is that the work you'll see is used with tools that photographers already have, which are cameras that are this big and then cameras that are this big. So my 5D and my iPhone. So now how does this work? There we go. Okay, so I wanted to start with my favorite quote from one of my favorite writers. We must hear all the stories so that the world story, the great story, will have a chance to develop. And I share that from Achebe because, I mean, to me, this is really what's great about multimedia, I think, is that it's been this opportunity to just start kind of getting out of the role of just being the photographer with my own kind of singular viewpoint, stories that are often sort of preconceived before I ever leave my house and get on the plane and go to the place, and now I've started, being much more able to look at stories from various viewpoints and incorporating the viewpoints of my audience, incorporating the viewpoints of the subjects, although I hate that word, subjects of the photographs of the stories. I was asked to share work from two projects. One is Everyday Africa and one is Life Without Lights. And I was thinking about what relates those projects. And for both of them, it's that I wanted to use multimedia because I wanted to give more of a voice to the people in the story. So starting with Life Without Lights, as she mentioned, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. This was the beginning of my relationship with Sub-Saharan Africa. I moved to Ghana, and in 2007, I was walking around in the village that I lived in, and came across this scene of the children reading the Quran, and photographed it just mostly because it was this sort of beautiful and haunting sort of image, as I tried to document daily life in the community I lived in. But I kept at it because I realized that if you asked anyone in the village what development issue do they feel is most pressing for them, I think almost universally they would have said electricity. Like I said, this photo was 2007. They had been given power lines in 2000, and every election year the government did like a little bit more work, but they didn't actually have electricity in the lines 7 years later. They do now, but they didn't at the time. So I continued every night going out and photographing sort of what they're limited by and also what they're still able to do despite the lack of electricity. And then in 2010 I went back because I felt like it was incomplete without their voices. So I went back and did multimedia. I have to do this little dancing act of going to the other laptop to get videos going.
No mbone kama de chekate te biholla la nyanga te biholla la nyanga de bicentune de kama nyasam zan changla nyom pro tan pam bibi ma nyom pro tan pam bibi ha to ma bum ma ngba to gor bia bia shirin yarla no gor yarla ma ka yotan min wona ta tan pam bibi ran to ka bum ma bi shel nyala wahla maltapa wahla bia
Nous ordonnons ta casa que se meta que boire le bon. Angin te yu tang pour ne marre vraiment tang bon. To ko jira la lete.
I mean, does it need to reload or? It's loading a little bit more. It had started, well.
Roma est bien. Le papa. Mani kama ko yin bien ni. Ka kwa ka wona jantin nyam pa wa man. Ka zama bien. Kikenan pam den me tab kat bon ne te be ken shukur. Kikenan pam den me bi zan ba tahri yona. Roma kalan sama azu be gen ba kan. Shukur bi ma yekar ka pa yu. Roma ne ka shukur ma ne zo. Bi jibal na yen nan shan lab ta kar be en dola du bi. Na ma bugun kan.
zo te ya mosra nanya shel de pulo nyala la ma mosete to zo ti yan kana te yo te nyam kar mala nyom pulo ma dant la ni sim yaw te ni be dang ni yo de zo la pamba ma kateka to ren chante tan pensé te to ngona tan pensé ma yel mosra ma.
And so I'm only going to show a couple minutes of each of these, but so I mean that was a 6-minute video. It took me about a month to build, just because I had to teach myself how to edit video. My wife had surgery on her shoulder at the time, and she's in medical school, which she could absolutely not take any time off of, and it's very worthwhile to care for someone who's in medical school, because that eventually means they'll be a doctor, you know. So I would basically help get her out the door, and then teach myself to edit video for a month, which is quite a lot. And I think that's one of the key things with multimedia, is that it's you know, you don't have to be an expert in everything. You can certainly try to get these new skills, but to me it's much more worthwhile to try to partner with people. So I went on from Ghana and tried to make this a global project. So this is a community in New Mexico in the States that's never been connected to the grid. You have to look to one side or the other. Maybe, well, I'll be coming back to a video in a minute, so I wouldn't worry too much about what's up there. But anyways, this is in Kurdistan in northern Iraq. This is in the UK, people that actually are connected but couldn't afford their electric bills. The one all the way to my left, you're right. And then this is a hospital in Ivory Coast when the power went out during a C-section operation immediately post-war Ivory Coast. So you know, it was quite an intense time of trying to learn these new skills and fundraise for this massive global project, talk to energy companies, the UN, et cetera, and do all this sort of liaising and wearing all these many different hats. So I was really excited when then, getting back to them, then the folks from the Bombay Flying Club, which is a Danish multimedia production company, approached me and said, well, we're starting this project, the Energy Action Project, and we know you've been working in this issue quite a bit, and would you like to come on board? And it's really useful to partner with people that know what they're doing, because then, for example, one of the things we've produced that I'm going to slide over here and show you in a second was the result of a one-week trip to Liberia in 2013, and instead of me spending a month editing a six-minute video, Henrik Kastenskov, who is a really fantastic video producer and shooter and editor, spent a few days producing it. So, do you want to switch back to the video? Please. I'm just going to show just part of this.
We don't have 4 hours, 7 days a week electricity in Liberia, so we have to buy fuel oil to our generator to provide.
All right, we're going to, maybe if you touch it again, I don't know. Yeah, basically. Yes. All right, well, maybe you'll just have to take my word for it. Nobody tell Henrik that this happened, huh? All right, let's keep moving, I think. Yeah. But so an act is 4 photographers, videographers, 1 distribution manager, and most importantly, 1 person doing all of that work of going to energy conferences, fundraising for us, you know, going to UN meetings, bringing it to solar lighting companies, et cetera, and trying to get the you know, what you actually, all these figures that we've been talking about. But if you're an independent project, well, it's not very easy to do that as 1 person. It's much easier to do it as many people. So, but the project that's really so before we go on, I wanted to before we jump into Everyday Africa, I just wanted to show a couple more quotes that I think really talk about where we're at right now. So this one is, of course, from Tim Hetherington in 2010. I'm not so convinced that we're in a post-photographic world. Mostly, I hate the word post. I listen to post-punk and post-rock music, and I live in, you know, a postmodern time. I'm really much more excited about what we're pre or where we are now currently. But I think this is quite interesting, you know, that we've got to start thinking about ourselves as beyond photography. And this one, I think, is even more interesting and much more surprising of who said it, that the kind of photography I did is gone, it's old, there's too many pictures now, it's overwhelming, there's too much to remember, et cetera. And that is from Robert Frank, which I think the photography buffs in the room might be surprised by. And, you know, to me, I think it's quite interesting. I mean, you know, there's certainly a part of art and communication that's very personal, and I think anyone that wants to do the kind of, you know, street photography, et cetera, that Robert Frank was doing should go ahead and do it. To me, it's still one of my favorite art forms. But you know, I think photography, or art rather, and communication and journalism, these things are also mirrors. They're also sort of reflections of where we're at now. So for me, well, I guess this is a good way to start talking about Everyday Africa. So, Everyday Africa is a stream of images. You know, Robert Frank was talking about this flood of images, this stream of images that's overwhelming. To me, Everyday Africa is about sort of embracing the project itself as a body of work. So Everyday Africa is an Instagram-based project. We have 138,000 followers, I think. We get a new 1,000 followers each week. And it's, yeah, well, it's grown massively in the 3 years that we've been doing it. So, so here are 3 elements of the project that I think are sort of important for us, but also indicative of many other multimedia projects today. So going back to the quote that I started with of hearing all the stories. Everyday Africa started in March of 2012 in an elevator in Abidjan. I was in Ivory Coast to do a sort of post-war story on the 1-year anniversary of Ivory Coast Civil War, the end of the Civil War. And I was in this elevator and wanted to this isn't a great picture, but I saw the symmetry of this reflection, and I wanted to grab it. And we were in this elevator on the way to get our press passes, and it would really suck to take out my big camera on the way to get my press pass and get in trouble just minutes before having permission to photograph. So I pulled out my phone instead. The writer I was with, Austin Merrill, he and I were sort of looking at that all day, and he's got an iPhone with him, and we started thinking about shooting with our iPhones, and the name Everyday Africa came up pretty much right away, and we spent the rest of the trip shooting with our phones at the same time. And of course, he and I are both people that, both of us were Peace Corps volunteers at different parts of our life, and we both spent, several years each living in West Africa. So, we were looking for these things that were much more familiar to us. This is the first image that I shot on that assignment for the story itself. So after days of photographing much more familiar, lighter moments with my phone, then I go and I'm doing this post-war story, and I'm looking for these, stupid metaphors that are completely unrelated to conflict. The smoke in the air has nothing to do with conflict. It's people burning their fields to refertilize it for the next growing season. But, you see this smoke and these, birds that represent vultures growing, and you think, oh, I'm here to do a conflict story. So you stop the car and jump out and grab this photo. Meanwhile, Austin, who is, a writer and completely uninhibited by the years of photojournalistic history that I've got in mind, he's, using his phone to take pretty pictures of the woman that worked at the front desk of our hotel in the morning. So, I'm showing these chronologically because I find it really fascinating what we focus on when we're on assignment versus what, that must be my laptop, whatever. Versus, the kind of daily life that we also see at the same time, and we usually sort of pre-edit out of our entire story. So, here's me photographing daily life while I'm eating breakfast in the morning. I'm just using my phone shooting the daughters of the people that own this breakfast place. And here's me photographing life for this post-conflict story, dead animals hanging from a tree. And then here's me going back to Everyday Africa. I grew up with these sort of teary-eyed, snot-nosed children on TV with, commercials telling me, $1 a day will save this child's life, et cetera. But we never actually see photos of the parents that want to wipe the nose of that child. So I took out my phone, and this guy ran over to his kid and was like, no, not until I wipe his nose off. So that's my favorite Everyday Africa picture, actually. Didn't put a cigarette out, but what are you going to do? And then this is Austin photographing breakfast, as he always does. This is me photographing, a village that was destroyed and had been left in the same condition for a year. And then at the same time, the Adidas guy, Austin, is photographing in the same village, just a few feet away from the destroyed house. This guy lives in the city now, but was back in his village visiting. I know, sorry, it's weird when I point because it's everywhere. And he just wanted to talk to us about what nightclubs he's going to and what music he's listening to. And of course, we're focused on this, or I'm the serious photojournalist focused on this. So. Part of saying we must hear all the stories is recognizing that this goes far beyond my own work. I'm much less interested in again, my sort of view as a photojournalist, and much more interested in embracing all these different viewpoints. So Everyday Africa is about 30 photographers now. Most of the active photographers at the moment are African. In fact, I think all but a handful of the images you're seeing here are shot by African photographers, all over the continent. And, as you can see, quite an array of daily life. So, and, the power in having an Instagram feed and having people come to me has been really exciting. I mean, it's we've talked a little bit about the difficulties of getting things published. I mean, Kadir's story of the New York Times saying, "Oh yeah, we'll take that." I mean, that is not the norm at all. I mean, it's usually much more difficult to get this work published, and this is also not the norm. This is a matter of editors coming to me and saying, "I've been following you on Instagram, and I really like it, and I'd like to publish it." So this is a Internazionale in Italy, National Geographic, and Newsweek Japan. And to have someone like National Geographic, who we generally associate with distributing these stereotypical images of Africa, come to me and say, we'd like to show your project that's very much about the opposite, was a big victory. And then things got crazy and just exploded in ways that I never could have imagined. These are just 9 examples of the dozens and dozens of everyday projects that exist now. Some of my favorites are the Middle Eastern ones, Everyday Middle East, and then Everyday Iran is really amazing. Everyday Iraq is not up there, but they're really amazing as well. And it's just been this crazy thing that now I'm sort of unwittingly at the head of a movement, but it's very exciting, and we're forming a nonprofit now that's based on our education work, but I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But and we wanted it to spread as a movement. Some people have told me that I'm totally nuts for not just registering everyday feed that I can think of, but the idea is very much to just have people look at it and say, I get what these guys are doing with Africa. That part of the world is important to them, but here's a part of the world that's important to me for similar reasons, and so I want to grab this feed and do the same thing. So the second thing, which is sort of related to hearing all the stories, is then going into user-generated content. So this is the Everyday Africa website. It's everydayafricaproject.com. Speaking of which, I was talking about what skills you need versus what skills you should farm out. For me, a really vital skill has been grant writing, because I don't know how to do any of this, but I do know how to describe what I want and put it into a grant and get money to do it. So this came from an Open Society Foundation grant and some Pulitzer Center funding, and it was made by a company called Uncharted Digital. So this is our website, and what you're seeing in the middle column is it's just a continuously running stream of our Instagram feed, so that's the Everyday Africa photos. And then all of the photos in the side column are hashtagged Everyday Africa images from Instagram that are also getting sucked into this, so that we can start to look at what does this phrase mean to various people, regardless of whether or not they're professional photographers. You can also sort it by country. I guess I didn't include a slide, but if you clicked on one of these countries, you'd see all of the Everyday Africa images from that country, and then every image that's been hashtagged with Ghana or whatever else. You can click on it by photographer. And then Everyday Everywhere started, and that was a result of all of these everyday feeds coming together and kind of trying to decide, okay, what are we, and what does it mean to have an umbrella organization for a movement? I've been describing us as a mix between, the folks at Instagram said that we're like the new Magnum, which I don't really agree with, because we don't have this sort of strict membership. We want it to just expand. So I've been calling it a mix between Magnum and Occupy, basically. But Everyday Everywhere was a technical solution to that. Whoever is controlling the Everyday Everywhere Instagram handle, any photo that they click that they like gets sucked into a Dropbox, and the caption gets sucked into a text file in that Dropbox, and then they sort of clean it up a little bit and repost it. So we've been doing that with they choose the sort of best of for all of the everyday feeds, and then anything from other people that's been hashtagged with Everyday Everywhere. So that who is in control of that feed switches off every 2 weeks. So far it's been internal, but we want to start inviting other photographers, other artists, whatever, a range of people, and it's another way of sort of sharing their view. It's a way of them, using photos that are already out there. I'm starting to feel like I'm describing Blind Spot a little bit, but them using material that's already out there and curating it in a way that fits with what they think is important. And then the final one is, like I was saying earlier, that to me, the project is the document. This isn't about sort of one photo being the piece of the thing that should be remembered years from now, or one photo being the evidence. To me, the evidence is the entire project taken as a whole. So I'm really fortunate this week to be working with a book designer here in Amsterdam, and we're working on the Everyday Africa book, which will include the Instagram commentary from many of the images. And this was the first image that made me realize that I had to do that. It's a picture of kids happily playing jump rope in Guinea-Bissau, and the comment saying, "Why are Africans treated so horribly? I'm sad." And it's just like crazy to me how ingrained it is in us to see any image of Africa and think like, those poor people, how can I help them? Even when it's a perfectly happy image. So the book is going to be about the different ways that we sort of project our ideas onto the continent. Calabar, Nigeria, and the comment is, I have many great memories of my childhood in Calabar. We're seeing this a lot more. In fact, it's easy to look at our project and see an arc from when we had 10,000 followers, all of the comments were more like this, and now that we've got 100,000+, it's more and more. It almost seems exclusively to be just African commentaries saying like, I loved growing up here, I'm glad you showed this, etc. And so that's been really fascinating to watch. And this one I feel kind of encapsulates why we do the project. It's a little girl takes her bath before going to school in the morning in Ghana, and then the comment saying, it's a beautiful picture, but a sad context, and the response saying, why is it sad? She's bathing, she's got clean water to do so, she's in the sunshine, and she's heading to school. Please stop assuming that because life looks different than yours, it's tragic. So every time I read that part in high schools and middle schools, the kids are all like, oh, damn. Like, boom, they got you. Speaking of high schools and middle schools, I always start off each of my presentations there asking, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Africa? And this one, many of them look like this. This was the only one that they started off with the word bad. But I saw 2,000 students last year, 2,000 American students last year, and this is a sample of many of them. And of course the size of it is how many times we heard those words. So they always start with their poverty, Ebola, hunger kind of things, and then they go into the Lion King department of safari and just listing. Once one kid lists an animal, then like the gate is open and the next kid lists another animal and the next kid lists another animal and so on. But this is really why we do what we do, and it's where the whole thing is moving. At the same time that we made a website, we used that grant to create an educational curriculum and to pilot it in a school in the Bronx. And the curriculum consists of, we identify their stereotypes of Africa, we start teaching them about Africa using our images, and then we move on from there into a discussion about what media stereotypes they feel impact them. And then we start doing practical photography lessons. And by the end of it, they've created their own everyday project, and the students are in control of it. So in the States, we did that in the Bronx, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. And then in February, we had our first workshop outside of the States. It was in Mombasa, Kenya. And now there is an everyday Mombasa. Did I remember to? No, I thought I had slides of it, but I don't. Now there's an everyday Mombasa that is a school club at this one school, so it's going to be entirely student-run. And the most exciting part of the whole thing was that we had them we had them list out their stereotypes, like you saw, and then they Skyped with a Chicago classroom about their stereotypes of each other and sort of talked through that. And now they'll be sharing photos back and forth and then Skyping periodically to talk about their photography. And since Everyday Everywhere is kind of this global network, we're identifying sort of potential everyday schools worldwide and having the students continue to sort of have these global conversations. So I think we can stop there. And
Woo!
thanks. Thank you.